Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we're bringing you a conversation that happened a couple days ago on Mark Feigin's channel between him, Olexiy Arestovich, Lieutenant Colonel Advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, and Frederick Benjamin Hodges III, also more commonly known as Ben Hodges, a retired United States Army general who served as a commanding general of U.S. Army in Europe. He's currently the Pershing Chair in Strategic Studies at the Center for European Policy Analysis. Enjoy! Dear friends, glad to see you all on Feygin Live. We are starting a new stream. Today our guest is General Ben Hodges. Ben, General, glad to see you. Thank you for having me. We also have Yuri Rashkin from Rushkin Report, helping us to do a live translation of this conversation, for which we are grateful. All right, so let's start. Along the conversation, we shall have Olexiy Arestovich joining us. A little later, he is returning from the front, and he'll join our stream from Kiev. So, first question to Ben. Have you heard about the last news about the dirty bomb that Russian side made a public statement that Ukraine is going to provoke and use dirty bomb? And Russian Minister of Defense turned to a number of his colleagues in different Western countries, US, Europe, with that information. Do you think this information has far-going consequences? What do you think about it? Unfortunately, nobody already believes anything that comes out of Kremlin. The authority of Russian leadership disappeared, and everybody immediately recognized that this operation is a false flag to perhaps set conditions that Russia could put the blame on Ukraine for this. It makes zero sense for Ukraine to do that, and nobody takes that as a serious actual threat. We have over 140,000 people watching us live. I have a usual ask for all viewers: click the like button, share the stream in your social media to have the widest possible reach. What do you think about the likelihood of use of tactical nukes from Moscow on the front with Ukraine, or in Ukraine in general? Is that threat higher? Is it increasing, decreasing? What's going on with it now? Well, if you mean by the threat of use of nuclear weapons in general, it is increasing somewhat, but I don't think it's likely. For sure, I think Kremlin will attempt to create Ukraine uninhabitable, to make Ukraine uninhabitable, to continue launching missiles into civilian targets, and I think they will continue to deport Ukrainian citizens from Ukraine into Russia. They will continue what they're doing in Kherson today. But how long Kremlin is willing to continue and follow with these activities depends on how much the West continues to support Ukraine, how much the Russian people are willing to tolerate their losses being suffered by their force and their personal losses related to this war. I cannot believe that people around President Putin do not see it as a path to destruction of Russian economy, wealth. All right. I have next question. We heard in your earlier interview, Mr. Hodges, that U.S. has a plan to respond if Moscow uses tactical nuclear arms. You are not responsible for that plan. We have no information if you know more details about it, but what should we expect if Moscow does some demonstration nuclear strike somewhere in, I don't know, let's say Black Sea? What will be the consequences? Will it be just the response locally in Ukraine, or will the response, can we presume that response may actually touch upon the Russian territory? Of course, you're correct, Mark, that I am not privy to the details of U.S. response in that situation. But it could be kinetic or non-kinetic. It could be nuclear or non-nuclear. But I think there will be three considerations that will be taken into account. Number one, it will be coordinated with our allies, like Germany, Poland, Ukraine, France, and others. And I'm sure that US will coordinate, because they will have to live with the consequences of this action. Number two, it has to be proportional. Whatever the Russian nuclear weapon is used, US response will be proportional to that. And the third consideration, it will not necessarily be an escalation. Almost certainly that U.S. response will not be targeting anything within the Russian territory, within the mainland Russian territory. But instead of that, it'll be Russian targets on the Ukrainian territory. Thank you for this answer. We have a growing audience, and please continue sharing. This is very important. Continue sending links to that stream. Also hope people in Russia do see that information, because people in Russia are the ones who will likely be doing the dying on this front. So it is important. I have another question. When you were commanding general of the American forces in Europe, did you consider that Russian army is so ill prepared that they cannot produce a proper response to their adversaries, even such as Ukraine, because people considered Ukrainian army to be destroyed, and after 2014, nobody, after the beginning of this war, nobody even expected Ukrainian army to be so well prepared. Does it mean that Ukrainian army is prevailing indeed and Russian army is losing, or Russian army was always weak? So I made a big mistake. I grossly overestimated the quality of Russian troops. I've tried to understand how could I be so wrong? Why did I think they're so much better? And I think there are three reasons. Number one, I fail to appreciate the depth of corruption inside Ministry of Defense. So false reporting about numbers, false reporting about the readiness, terrible corruption and quality of arms that were given to Russian soldiers. Even food rations were expired. And we know that much of the equipment that they were provided was substandard. And this is because of corruption among the officers in charge of that part. The second thing that I missed was a lack of operational experience. I just assumed that Georgia, Syria, Donbass, Africa, I assumed that army had enough experience, had a lot of experience, but it actually was a small part of the military that participated in those operations. And so that's why you see ridiculous mistakes, multi-kilometer convoy on one road, and incapability of Russian Air Force to reach control of the skies, or incapacity of Black Sea Fleet to provide protection for their personnel and their assets. This comes from the lack of operational experience. And the third one that I missed is exercises that Russian military did were more like demonstrations or parades, were not the real exercises. So the whole world saw Russian tanks destroyed, Russian helicopters shot down. They did not have experience. They were not experienced. The biggest crime is to send soldiers to the front who are not ready to fight. But this is what the Kremlin has been doing. They've been sending young men who were not prepared, who were ill-prepared, and who were ill-equipped. Okay, so mobilization that was done, the decision that was taken on the 29th and 30th, it is being realized now in Russia. According to different estimates, it's anywhere between 300 to half a million, 300,000 to half a million, and they're getting ready to be shipped to the Western Front in Ukraine. How do you think, even with poor preparation, with with really poor quality equipment, can that quantity become a quality? Can this big mass help to protect those 4 regions that are occupied by Russian Federation on the territory of Ukraine? Or they will lose? As I said, the iron will beat the meat. This is a very good question. I think the Kremlin has decided to exchange. The Kremlin decided to trade bodies for time. To win some time? This is an attempt to prolong the conflict throughout winter. So no matter how many thousands of young men dies on the front, I think it was clear that the logistics was not ready, and I think you're gonna see thousands of young men who were sent everywhere to patch the front from Donetsk, Lugansk, and down to Kherson. They will be supervised, and their mission will be to slow down Ukrainian advance. And what we know from history is that the war is a test of will. And those soldiers which were mobilized, they do not want to be there. That's why I'm skeptical about their fighting capabilities and attitudes, no matter how many of them are there. And it's a shame, I mean, it's criminal to send troops not ready for the fight into the war. Mr. Hodges, then I have the following question. How surprising, or perhaps not, and rather predictable, was that there is such a gigantic technological gap between Russian armaments and Western arms supplied to Ukraine. Did you expect that early on? Were you aware of that when you were commanding American troops in Europe? How backwards is their equipment, that they're essentially models from the Soviet Union times? Was it predictable? Actually, I was impressed by some things that I have seen happening with Russian troops. They have one of the best electronic warfare capabilities. And actually, my belief was that there are new versions of tanks, and even T-72 Bravo tanks. That tank was a good tank. But the problem is that how they were employed. No matter kind of vehicle you have, if it is misused, it will be destroyed. In every video I saw of the Russian tanks being destroyed, it was in the wrong place. It was in the open, it was not camouflaged. It was easy to spot. Or they were too close together moving through a village or on the road. And so this reflects poor training. So some good equipment, but definite lack of training. Okay, next question then. If Russia had some arms which could be used effectively in this war, then why do they have to source all around the world some kind of munitions and weapons like UAVs in Iran? It appears that Russia doesn't have certain kind of arms, and they cannot manufacture them in the desired quantities. So that has an interesting aspect in it. That is a good question. The drones. They have drones. I was surprised that they had not yet created these kamikaze drones. There is no shortage of Russian drones. They don't lack them. Missiles that they're looking for, that is because of sanctions, because they cannot manufacture new ones. They preclude them from sourcing components. And also, I don't think planners knew that they'll have to launch hundreds of missiles against civilian targets. Hold on just a minute.
Секундочку, поэтому часть стратегического просчета. Секундочку,
I'm sorry.
извиняюсь.
So part of his calculation was that
Планировщиками в Кремле,
Kremlin planners were expecting to take Kiev so quickly
Киев возьмут так быстро,
that they had not prepared for the high usage of ammunition,
что они не готовились к большому количеству использования
which actually occurred. We technically have the same problem. We do not have enough ammunition in the West.
недостаточно боезапасов на Западе.
After our last 20 years of experience in Iraq and Afghanistan,
Последних 20 лет опыта в Афганистане и Ираке
we do not anticipate, or we do not have as much ammunition.
мы не ожидали, у нас нет такого количества боезапасов, потому что
We expected the other conflicts to occur. And thank you, Ben. We have advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, Olexiy Arestovich, joining us. He is our often guest on this channel. We're glad to see Olexiy. We've been discussing that last stage of war where Russia is using drones on civilian targets, and they're calling it critical infrastructure. Perhaps you can comment on that. Why is that happening? And maybe ask questions of Ben about other perspectives, etc. So you have the mic, Olexiy. In my opinion, Putin's formula is something like this. They understood that they cannot win this war, and now their task is to not lose. Because it likely means political death, probably physical death of Putin and his immediate surroundings. For that, they're using the following formula to exacerbate economic crisis for Europe with the prices on energy sources, to flood Europe with waves of refugees via Ukrainian blackouts, to stabilize the front and the parts where Ukrainian army was advancing by use of large numbers of mobilized troops, to stop Ukrainian military and then oversaturate the front and reduce our capabilities because they are somewhat limited, and create conditions for possible switch to counteroffensive on some parts of the front. Cheap Ukrainian arms that became a game changer in this war at this stage. Okay, we have some issues with com. No, all's good. So that Iranian weapons, they changed the rules not because of its quality, but of its quantity. So in essence, the main task of Iranian drones is to oversaturate our air defense system, to spam it, essentially, and to make us waste precious missiles on cheap drones. And ideally to create new conditions for more successful use of missiles and ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. And even perhaps their aviation again, if our air defense system will be down by running out of ammo. From Putin's point of view, this should bring situation to a stalemate. should convince Western countries that support of Ukraine has no future, and they need to sit down and negotiate. And find a way where they would be able to fix the results of this war, for example, Minsk III or something like that, and get something that they can sell inside of their country as victory, and save legitimacy of the regime in this way. Among questions that I would like to ask of Mr. General, what is his estimation, if this is not a secret, perspectives of creation of integrated air defense systems with the Western supplied systems? I'm meaning the time frame involved. Okay, so this is a question of capability, systems, and of course training. There will never ever be enough equipment to protect everything. So whatever systems we all have, they're always prioritized by leadership what will be protected. And you also have to have an integrated system, radar or other sensors, and shooters. So the radar, of course, would be determining what is happening and transferring that data to the defenders. We in the West, in Europe, and in the US Army, we don't have enough troops, enough air defense for all of Europe. I mean, only one battalion of Patriot in all Europe. That's US. And of course, what we learned during the last 8 months is that the demand is much larger than what we thought it is to be. I used to believe that the requirement was to protect airfields and seaports, but now it is clear that this adversary will use million-dollar missiles against civilian apartments and other civilian targets. So the requirement for missile defense is much more significant. It is much more significant than we estimated that to be. And I hope that the West is looking for systems to provide enough defense and help in that situation, because this is likely a number one requirement at this time on the front. We just don't have enough equipment that we can transfer immediately. This was always my first care when I was commanding our troops in Europe. Sorry if that is not an optimistic answer. Are you staying with us, Olexiy, or do you have time? Of course, if you guys are okay with me being here. And Olexiy, we have a synchronous translation, so you don't need to make big pauses. I'm just trying not to overtire the translator and give him some time to translate. Okay, we have an extreme with Olexiy, and we only have 15 minutes left with the general. He needs to go soon to catch a flight. So I have another question. Under which situation would U.S. forces perhaps enter the territory of Ukraine? It was a private opinion that we heard in an interview to one of the American channels that 101st Division that is being now moved to the border with Ukraine, that in case of escalation of events in Ukraine, can they, in your opinion, cross the border and enter Ukraine? So that statement
Это заявление
from 101st Airborne, right? This is part of normal operations.
операции.
They're there because a decision was made
Подписано решение
2 years ago
сделано 2 года назад.
to create a rotation of brigades in Europe.
Взгляд в Европу.
Of course, this unit is aware
Каждый знает,
that Russian forces are not too far from them in Ukraine, and Romania is a NATO ally.
страна-член НАТО.
So we've had American soldiers in Romania
У нас там
for a number of years,
там много лет.
and I think that nobody should
Не должен
take it wrongly. What are they doing there?
делать, зачем они там.
And I think that is so unlikely
Это так маловероятно.
that they will be attacked there.
У них же достаточно.
There is enough Ukrainian troops on the front ahead of them, so
Увеличивать конфликты.
there is no need for Russian troops to increase the conflict and attack Americans in the NATO country. Olexiy, your question.
Мой вопрос.
So,
Представляете себе, господин генерал,
can you imagine a strategy for Russia, any kind of strategy, after a couple months, 2 or 3 months, when they realized that mobilization did not work as they planned and
на фронте?
is not capable to
Мобилизация, удары
change the situation on the front?
то есть формула, выбранная сейчас, не сработала против Украины и против поддерживающих ее союзников.
Everything, mobilization, the use of drones, all the means they're using on the front. What else do you think they can do after realizing that? I'm thinking, my opinion is pessimistic. I don't think they can do anything after realizing that. But I would like to know what you think. To me, it is clear that Russian troops failed over and over on every step of this conflict. And the only strategy right now is to prolong the time,
Растянуть конфликт.
to extend the time. And Kremlin is aware of American elections going to happen in a couple of weeks in the United States. And I think they hope
Поэтому их только надежда
that Congress and government
увидеть американские конгрессы и правительства потерять.
to convince American side to lose that war for Ukraine. So what they're doing now, they're playing for time.
Играют на время.
I believe that Ukrainian forces
Украинские войска
will push them out, will push Russian troops back to the line of the 23rd of February in the next 2 months. And they probably will liberate Crimea by the summer of next year.
к лету следующего года.
That all assuming that US continues to support Ukraine
Рассчитывая на то, что США
in the same volume at least as we are supporting you now. And that all sanctions remain in place.
как есть.
And I think that Kremlin realizes this.
Я думаю, что Кремль это понимает.
And, you know, Dr. Schneider the other day, he said that, yes, for Russian side, it is
Недавно
bad for any Russian leader. It is really bad to lose in Ukraine, but it is much worse to lose in Russia. And Kremlin will have to start thinking about
в момент Кремлю придется думать,
how to save the regime.
чтобы спасать режим.
All right, we have 46 minutes of that stream and only have a couple minutes left. I have another question to Mr. Hodges. Ukraine applied for NATO membership. That fits its strategy, it fits its constitution. do you see perspective, short-term, mid-term, long-term, for Ukraine to join the NATO? Who it will depend upon, and what do you think? How other countries and Washington D.C., how will they
Washington, D.C.
act? Of course, I do hope that Ukraine becomes a member of NATO
Членом
as soon as possible.
можно скорее.
It is interesting that the countries used to be part of the Soviet Union or the Warsaw Pact. They all applied for NATO membership because they are concerned about their security and safety. But of course, as we can see, nothing is automatic.
Но, конечно, мы видим, что нет ничего автоматически.
I mean, Hungary and Turkey have not yet
Турция все еще не
confirmed joining of Finland and Sweden to NATO. It will happen, but as you see, this is not an automatic process.
что это не происходит автоматом.
I think the priority is for the United States
Я думаю, что
and Ukraine to strengthen their bilateral relationship.
сейчас главное для Соединенных Штатов и Украины иметь сильные двусторонние отношения.
And that United States needs to have a strategy for the whole Black Sea region.
Штатам нужно иметь стратегию на весь регион Черного моря.
And then I think we'll be in a better position to advocate for Ukrainian membership in NATO.
Требовать членства для Украины в НАТО.
Olexiy, I have a little bit of time left. Question from you.
Господин генерал, скажите, пожалуйста,
Mr. General,
могла бы оказаться
how do you see Ukraine? How do you think we could be of use to United States and NATO? Because usual questions is what the countries can give to Ukraine. I have a different question. How can we input into the situation in Europe? Because we technically now serve as the biggest donor of security for the West. Since day one, Ukraine indeed became the biggest security provider to the West.
Потребляет безопасность.
And I think that would help to open
Может открыть
the region of Black Sea from the economic perspective. It is a critical port between Europe and Eurasia.
коридором в Евразии. Поэтому я думаю,
So I think it would also help Poland,
это также поможет
Baltic countries, Romania,
Балтике, Румынии
and others to breathe a little easier.
чуть легче.
And I hope it will change the dynamics in Belarus.
Изменит динамику в Беларуси.
I think that the people of Belarus already are
Я думаю, что люди Беларуси
eager to get rid of Lukashenko. They see that there's no bright future being handcuffed to the Kremlin.
и они видят, что нет никакого светлого будущего быть в наручниках с Кремлем.
And I think that Moldova
И Молдавия может наконец
and Serbia and other Balkan countries could detach themselves, decouple themselves from dominating command of Kremlin in the region. Thank you very much. And I have the last question. We're running out of time. Let me ask that. It is about the role of China. It has its own processes going, perhaps from heavy authoritarian system into more of a personalized authority system with some totalitarian elements. Could it change the situation position of China in relation to this conflict? Right now, they do appear to be neutral, but do you think they will venture to provide more help to Russia, or they will keep neutral and use the situation to remain balanced, to maintain their relations with the West and America?
Четко, понятно.
It is clear that China made a good decision, and they demonstrated it a couple of weeks ago, that
Что они не будут помогать России.
China and India both gave a signal to Kremlin
Кремлю.
that they are not going to help Kremlin, and that they
Четко обозначили Кремлю.
made a point for Kremlin to not use nuclear weapons.
Я думаю, что Китай
I think China is not happy with Russia even for starting that war, because they woke up the West.
потому что это разбудило Запад.
Now, all of us, NATO is more unified,
Теперь НАТО более сплоченное,
our defense industries are gearing back up again,
наш военно-индустриальный комплекс опять начинает работать.
and so our overall readiness would be better than what China would have preferred.
Лучше, чем то, что предпочел Китай.
I think the Chinese are watching very closely.
Потому что Китай смотрит очень близко, если
If we and our allies
и наши союзники,
will stick together with Ukraine and defeat Russia.
если мы можем держаться вместе, сплоченные и победить Россию.
If they see that we lose the will to
Если они увидят
continue and to resist, I think they will be encouraged
то это их подбодрит,
to continue
бросать
to start challenging us in other regions, for example, in Taiwan. So consequences of Ukraine
Украину
are much
больше, чем
bigger than
much more than what?
just Ukraine. It has a global application.
Больше, чем только Украина, это имеет мировые последствия.
All right. We thank General Hodges for participating in our stream. It was very generous of you to come join and answer these questions. People know about you in Ukraine, in Russian media sphere, and this was a big honor for us to have you here. We, again, are thankful to our viewers who joined us live. I have a big ask to everyone watching to share that stream with anyone who needs to see that. Make sure you click the like button, you subscribe to our channels, and if you have been watching that in English, subscribe to the Privateer station. Ben, hugs from us. Thank you so much for joining.